The following presentation is about a severely disturbed French priest who committed such a vile double murder in the 1950s that it shocked all of France to the core. Guy Desnoyers was born on February the 24th, 1920 in Happelmont, a hamlet in Saint-Ouen in Meurthe-et-Moselle. He came from a fairly well-to-do and devoted Catholic family. His disabled sister was raped as a child, although there are no further details as to who was responsible. His maternal grandmother, who was a dominant personality in the family, promised the child to the priesthood at a very young age. He later completed the seminary in Bozeville and Villers-les-Nonces. Those who remember him described Guy as a good kid, but his friends noticed his keen interest in the female sex and had doubts about his vocation. During the Second World War, he was assigned to work in a German-run factory in Neuve-Maison, but he also helped escaped prisoners who were hidden at the home of his uncle. After the liberation, he told everyone that he had killed a German sentry, but had no proof to back up his claims. 2 years later he was ordained a priest, then assigned to the village of Blamont as curate. His superior, Father Klein, notices that his new recruit prefers to play basketball rather than read theology. Desnoyers does not take long to have his first affair with a woman named Madeleine. The priest seduced her before her marriage, and officiated at her marriage ceremony to a soldier from the village. When her husband is away on duty, he continues his affair with her. This liaison came to the attention of the church, who then orders his transfer to the parish of Réhon, in the industrial north of Meurthe-et-Moselle, where he makes a further mockery of his vow of chastity, in particular with a wealthy widow. Rumours start to circulate that he starts lavishing devoted attention on other females in town, apart from the wealthy widow who had recently lost her husband. The widow generously donates 150,000 francs for the repair of the church roof. This does not prevent him from continuing to see on a regular basis his first conquest, Madeleine. The relationship between Desnoyers and Madeleine lasted for 10 years. In July 1950, he was appointed parish priest of Uruffe, a village of 392 souls. An active priest in the community and very much appreciated by his parishioners, he distinguished himself in particular by setting up a football team for the local boys, or by organizing excursions. On top of this, he financed cinema and theatre outings for his young charges. The village elders find this priest quite impressive, and the young people really take to his modern and open personality. Such a priest was unheard of. They find they can open up to him. He had become everyone's friend, confidant and advisor. All this, however, was only a cunning facade. The priesthood was for Desnoyers a perfect camouflage, designed to secretly satisfy very unspiritual aspirations. There was nothing in the attitude of the priest of Uruffe that could make anyone doubt the sanctity or the sincerity of his vocation. His angelic gaze, attentive reading of the breviary, impeccable cassock, and studied pious poses. He was irreproachable. Thanks to all that talented acting, the priest of Uruffe managed to deceive the good folk for 6 long years. The relationships he had with the parishioners were never suspected. Young girls or married women who came to cheer on his soccer team, who locked themselves in with him in the secrecy of the confessional booth, or went for quiet walks with him during field trips. He comforted weeping widows and fresh maidens. Guy Desnoyers is very busy with his duties and maintains relationships with several women in the region, some of whom are minors, the age of consent being then set at 21. The rumour mill is active, and word is that the priest has been less than holy with a 15-year-old teenager, Michel Léonard. In December 1953, Michel conceives a child. Terrified his superiors will find out, he persuades her to give birth secretly in Ars, and to abandon the child to welfare services. The Bishop of Nantes, Marc Armand Lallière, learns of this scandal and promptly pays a visit to the errant priest. The latter throws himself on his knees and, amid repentant tears, supplicates for his forgiveness. The bishop is emotionally affected, and his confidence is restored in the wayward priest. The humbled Desnoyers returns to his parish, vowing to himself to be more clandestine in future. In 1956, he had a relationship with Regine Fay, a 19-year-old from Uruffe, who worked in a glass factory in Vaughan-le-Châtel. She succumbed to his seduction after many visits to the theatre together. Even her parents had entertained the charming priest in their home, convinced that his influence would benefit their daughter. Instead of receiving wisdom and guidance, she received his seed, and subsequently found herself pregnant, just like Michel Léonard 3 years earlier. Desnoyers convinces Regine's father that his daughter's lover is a local man who raped her during a village fete and left for the Algerian war. "Forget about the scoundrel," Desnoyers urges her father. Few people believe this story, though, and so he protests publicly in front of his parishioners and loudly denounces those who slander him. Regine Fay promises to keep the paternity of the child a secret, but refuses to give birth secretly, nor to abandon her child or have an abortion. Desnoyers is not happy about her decision, for he's afraid that the child will look like him, and that the truth of his illicit liaison will become public knowledge. He becomes obsessed with this train of thought, and decides drastic action must be taken. The demon, who up until this point only had part control of his thoughts and actions, is now allowed to have free rein. he suggests to Regine that a drive in the country will be very beneficial for her and the baby she's carrying. That, and the promise of a delicious lunch at an inn, is all it takes for the girl to jump in his Renault 4CV and sign her fate over to the now inhuman Desnoyers. On December 3rd, 1956, with a happy and heavily pregnant Regine sitting in the passenger seat, Desnoyers leads the future mother of his child to a small deserted road that leads to Pagny-la-Blanche-Côte. He stops his 4CV near a grove and twice asks Regine to give him absolution. Surprised and suddenly frightened at this request, she refuses and walks quickly away. Guy Desnoyers follows her, aiming his .25 caliber pistol. 3 shots ring out, and the pregnant girl slumps to the ground. Immediately after killing her, he disembowels her with the help of a scout's penknife, and pulls her baby from the womb. She is then 8 months pregnant, and the autopsy will reveal that the infant was alive. A little girl whom the monster baptizes to save her from limbo. Happy in his crazed delusion that he has paved the child's way to heaven, he then cold-bloodedly kills her with the knife, then slashes her face in order to erase any possible resemblance. Finished with his gruesome and evil task, he pushes the mother and her child into a muddy ditch. In the evening, the parents of Regine Fay are worried about their missing daughter. They ring the priest, who acts most concerned and who in turn alerts the mayor and the gendarmerie. Desnoyers craftily organizes the search party himself in an attempt to avert any suspicions falling upon him. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the demon in a cassock points to a ditch by the side of the road, in which the mutilated remains are lying. Unbeknownst to Desnoyers, Regine's friend Michel tells the gendarme that the latter had confided to her that the priest was the father of her child. All eyes were suddenly on Desnoyers. A .25 caliber casing was found near the body, and they quickly discover that Desnoyers held a license to carry a weapon of this caliber. He is quickly arrested and taken into custody on December 5th, 1956. Guy Desnoyers vehemently denies the accusations put to him. He claims at first that he knows the murderer, but that it is impossible for him to denounce him because of the secrecy of the confession to which he is bound. The seasoned investigators can see through this lie and continue to grill him relentlessly for 48 hours, until he wearily confesses his guilt. Because this outrage happened during Advent and the Feast of St. Nicholas, the people are very upset. Desnoyers is locked up in prison under a false name to avoid a lynching. The church goes into damage control and organizes atonement ceremonies for the heinous crimes committed by one of their priests. The people were hard to appease, as all of France was horrified by this vile double murder. The trial begins at the Court of Assizes of Nantes on January the 24th, 1958, a little over 1 year after the crime. The crowds gather at the courthouse and demand the death penalty for this fornicating and murderous priest. On January 26, after 2 days of trial, the prosecutor agrees wholeheartedly with the crowd in his indictment. I do not know if this God whom you have served so ignominiously will have pity on you at the hour of your death. I only know the justice of men, and I know that it cannot forgive you. The defense lawyer, Robert Gassay, answers him, God of mercy, descend into the conscience of the court, into the souls of the jurors. Tell them they have no right to touch life, because life is yours alone. Before the jury deliberations, Desnoyers makes a final statement while addressing the jurors. I admit all my faults. How did it happen? I do not know. I sincerely regret what I have done. For this I apologize to God, to the Church, to the families of my victims, to the whole of society. I am still a priest. I abandon myself to God because I trust in His mercy. After an hour and 40 minutes of deliberation, the 7 Lorraine jurors delivered their verdict. After their deliberations on the double crime of murder, on infanticide and on premeditation, the verdict of the jurors is yes by a majority. However, the accused is recognized to have mitigating circumstances. They are wary of condemning a man of the cloth to death. Their religious reticence allows him to escape capital punishment. He was sentenced to hard labor for life. The truth as to why the death penalty was not handed down to the priest of Uruffe may be explained by allegations that pressure was exerted on the jurors during the deliberations. This was in order to preserve relations with the Vatican. It was the son of a former juror who revealed this to an author who was writing about the case. On August the 5th, 1978, after 22 years of detention, Desnoyers obtains a parole after becoming the oldest prisoner in France. His location after release is kept secret, and people are concerned that he might end up in their community. The disgraced ex-priest has no desire to rejoin society, and is transferred directly to the Saint-Anne-de-Kergonon Abbey in Plouhanel in Brittany. He lived the rest of his life there, protected by the Church in anonymity, and died on April the 21st, 2010, at the age of 90. In the cemetery at Uruffe, the gravestone of Regine bore the following inscription: Here lies Regine Fay, killed on December the 3rd, 1956, by the parish priest, at the age of 19. Despite repeated requests from the bishop, Regine's family always refused to remove the inscribed truth. After the death of Regine's father, the epitaph has been twice erased. Indeed, following repeated pressure from church officials, who kept up the pressure on a family grieving for their daughter. It now only mentions the name of Regine. Any mention of the young girl and her child's fate, and of who was responsible for them being encased in the cold clay so prematurely, miraculously vanished. The church performed their magic and successfully made it disappear.
Confess to me, child, and all your sins will be forgiven.
My dear friends, it's me behind the screen, Father Oddie. So, my dears, tell me, what are your thoughts on Guy Desnoyers? I mean, the fornicating was enough, but the horrible, mutilating murder, my goodness. You know, there was a lot of that going on, especially back in the times when sons were picked to go into the priesthood, who were obviously not meant for the priesthood. I think in Guy Desnoyers' case, he deliberately went there knowing that he could take advantage of the situation and use his position to abuse females. There has been so many cases in the Catholic Church of abuse over the centuries, we'll never know all of them. His is an extreme case because it involved murder, but there were many others that didn't involve murder. Must have been quite terrible if your family picked you out to join the priesthood, or if you were a woman to join a convent and you were highly sexed. I think I've mentioned this in another case that I presented. Forgive me if I have, and I may have mentioned what I'm about to say also in another case. Forgive me also if I've already regaled you with that. When I was a boy, when my parents went back to England from Australia, I was an altar boy for a while, and there were two priests assigned to this church. One was English, he was the really old guy, and one was Irish, a big strapping young Irishman. Both salt of the earth, really. No altar boy underwear rummaging going on there, I can assure you. No, he was a really good man. But the reason I'm mentioning these two priests were because you had to go to confession, you know, being a Catholic. And I can still see that confessional booth with the little red lamp on, showing that the priest was ready to accept a sinner. Anyway, the younger priest, Father McKenna, the Irish one, you know, he had the booth, and you go behind the screen, similar to the one you're looking at now, and you talk to him. But the old guy, eventually he went senile, the old guy, and he would wander out in his pajamas. Eventually they had to confine him to his room, poor soul. But anyway, he couldn't hear. So when you went to confession, you had to go into a room with him in the rectory. The teachers would take you to confession. They'd take you from the school that was a Catholic school, and they'd take you, and each one of you had to go in the room one after the other, and he had one of those old-fashioned ear trumpets. I'm still laughing. I can still see the scene in my mind. And you'd have to speak loudly into this ear trumpet. Oh my goodness. There are some memories I have through my life, but that one is precious. It really is precious. Anyway, back to the case at hand. Well, there's not really a great deal that I can say about it that hasn't already been said during the presentation, apart from the fact that the Catholic Church covered for him. They knew of his indiscretions, and as they do in all of these cases, they moved the priest to a different parish. And that's what they've done time and time again with other priests. They just move them on. Before I go, we'll have a quick look at a few things I found online pertinent to this case. And also, I just want to say, I believe this is the only English presentation or in-depth investigation of this case in video form, or even in writing in English at this time of writing in June 2022. By the time that it comes to YouTube, some other YouTuber may have saw my advertising of it for Patreon, and in that time may have covered the case after seeing my trailer for it. I have found no other source in English for this case, so I'm happy to bring this to you, my dear patrons. Anyway, let's have a look at a few things online. So here we are, miraculously online. This is a site called cimetièremélois.fr. I probably pronounced that wrong, never mind. It's about Regine's grave here. Here we see it, a recent version of it, minus the truthful epitaph. There we have. There is a larger photo of it here. You can see just really has her name now, minus all the rest. So they got their way in the end, didn't they? The Catholic Church. They didn't want that on there, even though it was just the truth. They didn't want it, so it took them a while, but they got there. Also found this site. It's called jeanraspail.free.fr. Be careful though, the connection is not secure. Anyway, it's the only site that features Guy Desnoyers photographed in the 70s, after he was retired to the Abbey in Brittany. So there we have. I can't scroll any further down. That's as far as it goes. They caught him on camera here. So this was basically after he was released. He was already out and about riding his push bike. Interesting, eh? Did his time, I guess. Did his time, and the church treated him with great care after that. And before we go on a lighter note, I have found a mini desktop church confessional. Isn't that wonderful? A little booth. Lighted booth. Let's confess. If you've ever had that sort of, that inhibition to go and confess in one of those little claustrophobic booths, you don't need to do it anymore. You can do it from the comfort of your own easy chair. Your own desktop confessional. I think that's marvellous. Absolutely marvellous. So what do? Do you press this button? Press down on the kneeler and the screen lights up in the back of the booth. The priest will say, "Tell me your sins." When you've finished, lift up your fingers from the kneeler. Oh my goodness. Whatever will they think of next? That is funny. That's so funny. Years and years ago, I had a channel here on YouTube. It's still there. It's dead. A dead channel now. And it was it was called YT Confessional. And I encourage people to come and confess their sins online. I think it was the first ever. Everyone was saying it's a great novelty. No one had done it before. Yeah, it just reminds me of that. An online confessional. That is funny though. That is so funny. Well, my dears, I'm going to head off now, and I'm already looking to the next case. Well, I'm looking for the next case. I'm sure. Well, I've got a lot on my bucket list, but I can't. Oh, did you hear that? My cat is crying in the background. I'm not sure if the microphone picked that up. She didn't like her lunch. She's getting very choosy in her old age. She didn't like her lunch, even though it's really expensive cat food. She's getting very choosy, and she didn't eat the lunch, so now she's annoyed and wants an early tea time. It's not happening yet. You'll have to wait. Anyway, my dears, I'm going to head off and think about what the next case will be. I'd love to know your thoughts, as always, on this case and any other points that I have made. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye. Well, after discussing one of my old channels on YouTube back in the early days when I came on anyway, it was about 2009, I went to the Wayback machine and I found how my channel looked back then. It was wonderful what you could do with YouTube back then. You could have, your own background. You could design your own background. It was basically one page back then. You didn't have all the different subcategories that you have now. It was one page. But I really thought it was, you could be very creative with it. And here we have it. St. Clementine's Church of Ambrosia. Let us come together. Services hourly and evenings. Air-conditioned booth. Not many confessions can say that, can they? Ensuite and mini-bar. And they can't say that either. Situated in the peaceful hamlet of Lubberly. 2 minutes from the Throttled Snake Inn. It's a lovely inn, I can assure you, my dear friends. A wonderful inn. Well, there you go. A trip down memory lane. Style, spiritual. You had styles back then. Ambrose Clementine. That was my name before Audibo. Ambrose Clementine. What a lovely sounding name. 2010. Look at that. And there's a big blurb there of what you could add about your channel. A big blurb. Look at it. Oh my God. Bring it back how it was. Subscribers 84. Occupation Father Confessor. The Church of Ambrosia. I think there's maybe even a couple of videos still on that channel. Memory. Look, there's my booth. Father Ambrosia's booth. Father Clementine. Wonderful memories of the old days of YouTube. My goodness. I'm a veteran. A YouTube veteran. Anyway, I thought I would see, you had comments back then. 934 channel comments. Wow. Behave yourself in the chapel, otherwise you might get a bolt. Indeed. God was on my side. The cat is going crazy now. God was on my side. Yeah, look, so you had comments there. They don't have that anymore. Isn't that amazing? Bring it back. It was a much better design. They have really sort of closed in on us. It's no longer free. That it used to be like the Wild West. I loved YouTube back then. And I'm rambling and I'm going. Tati-bye. God bless. God bless. I'm allowed to say that on this channel because I am Ambrose Clementine. Father Ambrose Clementine. Tati-bye. Go in peace, my children.